All right, it looks like we are live. Thank you all for joining us, and welcome everyone who has just joined. We're just going to give it a few seconds for some more attendees to flow in, so bear with us with the awkward silence. It will be the next 60 seconds, and then we'll kick things off. All right, I think we can get things rolling. Probably people will miss my very lengthy introduction anyway, and then they'll get to enjoy the good part of everyone else speaking and answering the questions that we have today. Good morning, afternoon, and evening, depending on where you are in the world. Today, we'll be talking about Gear Up for Tech, a career guide for veterans. You can expect an hour of a panel discussion. At the end, we will be doing a live Q&A. My name is Kendall Barnett. I'm the business manager at Trust in Soda. My firm Soda is a B certified corporation, which is within various community groups we work within to reach underrepresented and diverse audiences. One of our groups is our social enterprise, Ex-Military Careers, and its mission is to find meaningful employment for veterans. So our goal is really to bridge the gap from the military to the civilian career. We have over 200,000 followers on LinkedIn. We host industry thought leadership events, such as the one that you'll see today, to support veteran employment initiatives and really just bring awareness to the community, allow for networking amongst our peers, so on and so forth. We do want to make this discussion as engaging as possible. So if you do have any questions from our panel throughout the webinar, please feel free to ask them in the side panel or in the Q&A section, and we'll go through as many of those as we can towards the end. And lastly, before we kick things off, please note that this will be recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel. On that YouTube channel, you can also review previous or access some of our previous webinars as well as any of our future ones going forward. I'd like to start by introducing our fabulous panel. We'd love to know a bit more about our audience as well. So please feel free to drop, your name, where you're from, your background as well in the chat, so we can all continue to network, after this. But to start, I guess, to my panel, can you please give us a 30-second whirlwind intro of who you are in your professional career so far? Keith, why don't you kick us off?
Hi, my name is Keith York. I served in the Army for 6.5 years in the infantry. After exiting the military, I went back to school and started working in tech industries. My first time in the tech field was in the financial tech industry. And now I work for a company called Premier Digital Services, which is a media solutions partner that works in social content. So really excited to be here.
Excited to have you. Perfect. Luke, I'll pass the baton to you. Do you mind giving us a brief overview of who you are and what you've been up to?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Luke Doty. I joined the Marine Corps in 2005. I did 2 deployments as an infantry machine gunner. Got out in 2013 and kind of didn't really know what to do with my life, but I had some influence toward technology, ended up going to UNC on the GI Bill, got a degree in computer science, worked in the advertising industry for a little bit, and somewhere along the way ended up starting a company and co-founded a company actually with my brother, and been doing that full time for about 5 years now. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So spend a lot of my time working technology, just general running a technology business. That's it.
The entrepreneurial path. Perfect. Okay, and Jeremy, how about you?
Yeah, thanks. So Jeremy Patterson, spent about 10 years in the Army as a signal and then a telecommunications systems officer. Separated in 2016, I think that sounds right, the summer. Went to work for a defense software company. That was my undergraduate, was in programming, but had been long forgotten. but went to work there, got more current on tech and stuff, and now for the last couple of years, a senior engineering manager for a company called Zen Business, and just enjoying remote and tech life.
Love that. Perfect. And Zach, how about you?
Yes. So I was in the Marine Corps from 93 to 99. I was in the communications technician at that point. Luckily, I fell into my first career job at WorldCom, where I kept on doing communication work, done mostly fiber optics. When the telecom business dropped out in the early 2000s, I went back into software development, which was a hobby of mine. So since then, I've been through multiple industries, but most of it in the telecommunications industry. And I currently work as a software development manager for Summit Broadband here in sunny Florida.
Perfect. Very jealous as I sit here in the freezing cold that is Boston. But first and foremost, thank you all for your service. I'm excited to dive into these questions, so I'll really just hit the ground running. My first question is going to be for Keith. So perhaps one of the first major pitfalls veterans face in the job search is being able to talk about their skills in a way that makes sense to civilian employers. 79% of veterans actually find it at least somewhat difficult to translate their skills upon leaving the forces. So with that in mind, how would you recommend learning how to translate military skills and experience when it comes to writing resumes, interviewings, and of course, ultimately landing a job?
Right. Thanks, Kendall. I think there's quite a few things that you can focus on. Through your time of service in the military, of course, you develop several soft skills, management skills, problem-solving skills, resiliency, right? There's a lot of things that I don't think we always think about, and addressing those within your resume and search and calling those items out can be really helpful. As well as, there are different resources that you can start to develop and build your skill set out to expand upon, some of those soft skills that you already have, whether that be using your GI Bill or attending coding boot camps or tech transition programs that are offered as companies as big as Microsoft, where they offer their own software and systems academies. So tons of resources out there to, really develop that skill.
Absolutely. And Luke, I know you had quite a bit of insight on this question as well. Do you have anything that you might add in regard to that?
Yeah, I would first just say that it's very common. I experienced this myself. You're going from the infantry as a machine gunner to a software engineer is not like the most direct transition. And I definitely felt that I didn't know what to put on my resume or even how to write a resume. And it ended up me just kind of waffling a little bit and walking into interviews and just putting my college and just briefly talking about my military career. But the more I get into, the older I get and the more experience I get, the more I realize how much I actually pulled out of my military experience. And so I think it's there, and it is just being able to translate some of the human aspects of it into your resume and putting it down and just being willing to talk about it and being able to filter that through like a civilian like language filter is really what it boils down to. Is if you think it's a skill, put it on there. Honestly, I haven't gone through college and the military. You pick up a lot of the same skills, but the mindset is different coming out of the military, where you're, oh, I don't have these same skills, but it's not really, I don't think it's really true. So I would say focus on how you dealt with people, your day-to-day job, put those bullets in there, and just trust that you have been developing a lot of really valuable skills. And if you see it, the people who are interviewing you will also be able to kind of drill down and see it.
Yeah, I think both of you bring up a really good point. A lot of times I think we all forget to include our soft skills and the experience that can bring to a table on a resume, right? And in an application process. So with that being said, Jeremy, I'm curious, in your opinion, what's the difference between hard and soft skills, and which ones should you maybe focus on and highlight on when building your resume as a young veteran hoping to enter the civilian workforce?
Yeah, thanks. So I would say that, for me and the way I kind of see hard and soft skills, is hard skills are things that are going to be technical knowledge, your ability to work in whatever domain you go into. So as an engineer, it's, do you know JavaScript or Java, whatever programming languages, and the like. The soft skills is, that is going to be things like leadership, ability to function with human beings. That's a big one in tech. But they are, in my opinion, equally as important. So moving into tech, it depends on, as you're targeting different positions. Is it an entry level? And then as you move up, obviously you do have to display more hard skills as you move up. But throughout that whole time, the soft skills that you absolutely would pick up on in the military are important and will just prepare you for continued progression in your civilian career path as well. As far as highlighting on the resume, your hard skills a lot of times are just a conversation starter. Like I've done this programming language or whatever the case may be. But your soft skills, leadership, ability to work under pressure, those type things, are what you'll probably use just as much as whenever you go to work, and will come through a lot during the interview process themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree. And I think you bring up a good point around highlighting those skills. I see it all the time on the recruitment side, right? Where somebody might list what they've done. And I think one big differentiator is listing what you've done and how that benefited, your team, the organization, the project at hand, and being able to close that loop can be really beneficial for hiring managers by and large to understand the value add that you brought. With that, we have our first poll, a little engagement with the crowd here. So this question is, it can be difficult to know where to start your job search, particularly when the military gives you such a strong sense of purpose. How do you identify where your skill set can be of most value? So if you are currently, attending this and watching it, we ask that you pick, what you think helps you to identify where your skill set can be of most value and navigate those waters. And in the meantime, while we gather some pollies to submit their opinions and what they've, seen be most effective, Zach, I'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback on this question.
Well, for me, when I first started searching when I got out of the Marines is I wanted to find a company that my experience. So like I mentioned earlier, I was in communications in the Marines. So luckily I found one right out of getting out. I was unemployed for maybe a month. And so that very first point of researching, it was extremely helpful for me.
Absolutely. Perfect. And I don't know, I'm quickly trying to get these poll results for you all. Here we are. Okay. So it looks like, and just for those of you who can't see this, or if you're having any issues, I will read some of these responses. So the question was, finding a similar sense of fulfillment that you had with the purpose that you felt in the military, and identifying where your current skill set can be of most value. Some of the answers, and I think, most preferred answer at 50% was researching industries aligning with your interests and skills. Another, option that people leaned into. We're utilizing online job search platforms and company websites. Absolutely. Attending job fairs and networking events. I think that's especially, helpful if you are a bit more extroverted, right? Being able to get those soft skills across can be very helpful. And then seeking advice from career counselors or employment agencies, also at 13% with job fairs and networking events. Curious, did any of you of the panelists, did any of you attend job fairs or networking events? Were we particularly leaning into any one of these answers similar to our group here?
I'll go ahead and take part of that. Yes,
go ahead,
I did. I did go attend some job fairs, some recruiting events. Being an introvert, they're always difficult, but this is a career. This is something you want to do for the rest of your life. So you got to put yourself out there. You got to get past that uncomfortableness and just do it. But you never know, because when you network, you grow your network and you'll be able to add contacts and you meet people from other industries, and that might change your perspective on searching for a job.
Yeah. And did you find it helped you, with that kind of being more introverted, or maybe that fear of going and having to put yourself out there? Did you find the repetitions of that to be beneficial long term?
Absolutely. That's helped me in interviews along my entire career. You're never going to know the answer to every question you're asked. You never will. So your best point is have that confidence that you got in the Marines or whatever, career, whatever service you were in, and take that confidence with you. Just because you may not know the answer, speak with confidence and then follow up.
Yeah, I am, and bear with me, guys, because I'm going a little rogue here. But I think you brought up a point that about not always having the right answer. Out of curiosity, given you all are leaders, do you have any advice for interviewees when they are in a position where they're like, I don't know that, right? Is it best to be honest and upfront, or is it best to say, no, I don't know this, but X, Y, and Z, or try to answer? What do you prefer when vetting people for your own teams? And I'll open that up to anybody who wants to answer.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I try to ask questions I know people will likely not know the answer to. I'll look at the resumes and specifically to elicit this response. And in my opinion, I want to see somebody who is humble and can take a step back and say, hey, I don't know the answer to this. And maybe even you could help me work through with my experience to get to a reasonable answer that can show you that the way I think is really what I want. I want to see someone step back, because if I give you a task as an engineer, the last thing in the world I want is for someone to take that task, pretend like they know exactly what they're doing when they don't, and then run it to the end zone. I want somebody to take a step back, ask a question, and try to build understanding and context to move it forward. So if you get that question you don't know, the best bet is, first off, just say, hey, I don't know, but I have the context. Maybe I can work towards an answer that you like, kind of shows you how I would work towards solving this, is probably the best approach.
Absolutely. Almost, being a lifelong learner, being open-minded, that, there's always room for growth and building your skills. Fair enough. Okay, good. Well, I'll keep it moving right along and try not to go rogue here moving forward on my line of questioning, but I think that that's very helpful for anybody watching this. I'll pass the next one over to Jeremy. As a hiring manager yourself, I imagine you see a number of different profiles and skill sets for applicants on a daily basis, right? So what ways do you recommend, veterans, ex-military candidates can differentiate themselves from other applicants? And I'll take it one step further, right? So things like qualifications or training, mentors, networking, community groups. What would you recommend?
Yeah. So let me just start by saying, when it comes to resumes, there's never a one size fits all answer. There's different workshops you can go to that give you different advice. And it really is what works for you and the people on the other side of the table and how they receive it. For me, for a differentiator, as I mentioned before, it is going to show both your hard and soft skills. But really what differentiates is how you show your impact. You can have a soft skill that's completely unrelated to tech. But if you can show that you were able to take on a project that you knew nothing about or were unfamiliar with and see it from start to finish and show the impactful success of it, I think that's huge. And I would say to be honest, for even non-military people in tech industries, we expect the resume doesn't have 100% of what we're looking for. I actually got some great advice previously of don't ever rule yourself out. Make them rule you out. Now within realm of reasonability, obviously, but the resume in and of itself, trying to get your foot in the door to be start the process. You just like Luke said, obviously you can be honest and humble. Don't put something on there that you completely cannot speak to. That's just, I've seen a couple of those and like, that's okay. Well, we can stop the conversation, be polite and move on. But showing your impacts is really it. Showing your impacts, willingness to learn, and that growth path over time is kind of where I'd start with and say those are the things that you want to focus on, because you will be able to sprinkle in your hard and soft skills through it too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Fair enough. I will roll right along here into the next question. My next question is actually for Luke. So, support is out there, right? Veterans Affairs leaders say that they set record levels of veteran outreach through 2023. In light of this development, what steps can veterans take to benefit from resources online, and how can they go about finding them? I think that's one of the questions we get a lot, right? Where are these resources? How can I gain access to them? And then of course, leverage them. So could you maybe speak to that?
Yeah, I think when in my undergrad, I was able to utilize a lot of online materials, and we live in the age of information. So I would say lean into kind of the computer technology. Udemy was a great resource. It had one of the hardest things getting started in technology was I think the phrase is like eating an elephant one bite at a time, right? Because there's just so much information and it's so overwhelming when you first start to learn about technology. It's where do I start? How do I get from where I am to being able to land a job? And so just getting something that's very small and very bite-sized, so a very small tutorial. Pretty much every technology has a relatively approachable tutorial that is associated with that piece of technology to walk you through step-by-step how to use it. MIT has free course Computer Science 101 classes available. So you just search MIT course for computer science, and that will help point you in the right direction. YouTube is also going to have great content. Udemy, as mentioned again, has helped me a lot, especially with specific technologies for JavaScript or even CSS. Back in the day, jQuery, and those were relatively cheap courses, and really didn't provide a ton of meat, but they got me pointed and got me started in the right direction. And once you kind of get moving in the right direction, the answers and what you need to be looking at will kind of fall out as you get more and more exposure to the technology. So just start YouTube and MIT are probably the best.
I love that. And I love, the option for free courses, conscious that, depending on everybody's life situations, we can't go out and necessarily, right, drop tons of money on specific certifications. So it's nice to know that there are options out there that are affordable and can kind of help people to get on the right path. I know we did have a question in the chat, so I'm gonna actually pivot over there. So a candidate mentioned, or a candidate, I should say, a member of the audience mentioned the hurdles I am running into is that I will earn my BS in computer science networking in May, but I don't have any certifications or IT background. So I think from a, submitting my resume perspective, how, if anyone has any advice as to how to go about either getting certifications or, making their resume stand out in comparison to those who might have already done internships or have certifications, how could this person get a leg up?
Yeah, I think I'll go first. And then Keith, I know you have a link that I definitely would like for us to share as well. But for certifications, it really depends on where you're trying to go. For in the defense sector, certifications are heavily viewed, scrutinized, at some points, hard requirements. If you're trying to go into the commercial sector, which includes, fintech, business to business, all that good stuff.
Startups.
Yeah, startups. Thank you. Then it's less of a focus on those type things. One of the things, though, in lieu of certificates, and probably should have added this in my answer before, for the resume in general, is show your applicable knowledge that maybe a certificate will require. So if you've done side projects, as an example, or done a boot camp, those type things, put that on there to show that, yeah, you might not be certified for this thing, but you at least have some knowledge. As well as I've seen where people, will just straight up put down, I'm pursuing these certifications currently, on the resume as well.
Absolutely. Perfect. Okay. Well, I now have another audience poll, but before I do, I just want to make sure if we are having any issues with the chat, please make note of it. I know we had a little bit of technical issues, but I think we are back up and running. Regarding Keith, I know you had shot over a message, which I will also share the link to in the chat here after this, which gives a number of kind of resources for you to be able to access those sort of things that we were all just talking about. So moving on to our next poll, how important is it to grow your online presence and start building your personal brand? Please share any recommendations you have in doing so. So I'm very curious to see, generationally how this pans out. I think the increase in presence of social media and whatnot, what everyone's thoughts are. So if you are a member of the audience, please put in your votes now, and in the interim I will pass this one over to Keith as well as Zach to hear your thoughts.
Sure. Yeah. I would almost be on the not very important list. I myself don't have a large social media presence, really only on LinkedIn and Twitter at this point. But to say that, it's not to say you can't be selective in the social media that you do engage in, right? Like keeping your LinkedIn profile up to date and being able to use that to leverage to network with. But I just don't know how required it is to break into the tech field to grow a large social media presence. But you can also still display some of your projects that you're working on in a more private manner if you choose. So there are other options if that's something that you aren't necessarily interested in.
Absolutely. And Zach, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, first getting into the tech field, it's kind of hard to grow your your online presence. But you can start. There, of course, LinkedIn was mentioned, but from the software side of perspective, you could always get a membership at GitHub and start putting your own personal projects up there to create your own portfolio. And some employers ask you for your portfolio these days on the application. So it's a way for you to kind of just show what you've been doing, what you're interested in. Whenever I come across those as a manager, I do look at them. I see what their passion is. It also gives me a sense of their style of writing code. So I've already got got a good sense of what they're capable of by the time they come in for questioning. So it can be useful. It just all depends. For the hardware networking side, I'm not familiar with any resources like, GitHub that do those things for you, but, I'm sure they're out there. You just have to look for them.
Absolutely. Yeah. One thing, obviously myself working on the recruitment side, I couldn't agree more about keeping your media, especially your professional media, up to date. I think a lot of times people forget to list things like tech stacks, job responsibilities, updating those things as you go. And I think listing those specifically can really, really help propel you, especially things such as like industry, right? That you're working in, because a lot of times if a company is looking for a specific profile and they do have a recruitment team who's going out and doing that, they will be using specific keywords. And you always want to make sure that your profile is pulling up, right, for anything relevant. And even if you're just starting out, your industry interests, right, and adding that into your bio section are things that can help you to get a leg up, I think, opposed to your audience. I also think there's different types of media, right? We can also think of like thought leadership, right? So if you're passionate about something in the tech space, I have a lot of clients who are very intrigued when somebody's wrote papers, right? If they're maybe more academia focused, or if they're involved in like blogs or podcasts, right? And talking about this sort of thing. So I think, doesn't necessarily have to be you building, this huge personal brand, but definitely doing things like having an updated GitHub or anything to kind of show, hey, I'm passionate about where I'm going. I'm trying to go. I couldn't agree more with you both, Keith and Zach. Looks like, people were kind of, up at the top, extremely important, somewhat important, depending on their views. So very interesting mix, I think. Perfect. And moving forward. So the next question is for Luke. So what are the fundamentals of conquering the recruitment process in your eyes?
All right. So the recruiting process is a daunting one. I would first say if you have a recruiter, that is probably step number one. It is the recruiters have a great alignment of incentives. So if you're looking for a job, I would enlist a recruiter. They get paid when you start work. So just having somebody in your corner, they'll help you review resumes. Some of them will even mock interview you. I think the biggest thing to take away from interviewing is that every time you get an interview, it's super valuable. One, because it's a chance to land a job. Two, it is a way for you to gather information on what types of questions people are answering, and two, where you lack in answering those questions. So after every single interview, it should be kind of like a personal debrief where you are going over the questions, figuring out what you didn't understand, what you didn't know, and then going back and kind of filling out your knowledge and experience. So next time that comes up, it's you have a solid answer for that. As an employer, I'm usually adopting technology pieces that I know other companies are using. So you'll see that in interviews, that people are using the same thing. They're asking the same types of questions. And the reason why is it just makes hiring a lot easier. So I don't have to find specific experience for a specific tool or specific technology. So use all of the resources you have as a way to gather information, and then you can kind of refine and improve as you go. So even if you get a no and it's disheartening, just remember that interview itself is really valuable, and the information you can pull out of it, you can use to make yourself a better interviewer and increase your likelihood of getting a job.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think, a lot of times people come out and they'll think, I killed it. I had the best interview ever. Right. And then you find out they're not proceeding. Yeah. Right. And then on the flip side of that, I have no idea how they felt. And then they come back and say, we love you. We want to move forward. I think one question that I as well recommend asking at the end of an interview to all of my candidates is there anything that I can clarify for you before we end this conversation? Or is there anything that brought concern that I can, speak to ahead of us rounding out this call. And I think it allows for a moment of like self-reflectiveness. When you're interviewing somebody and you're like, okay, they want to learn how to be better, right? And then taking that and then being able to explain things and not be defensive is crucial, right? Because as an employer, you want people who are willing to, learn and understand and be self-reflective and then implement that moving forward. So loved that answer. Luke, I know we had a question from the, sorry, I just almost screen shared with you all. That would have been tragic misstep here as we all stare at our own faces. It looks like we had a question from the audience. So let me just pull up that in the chat. In what ways can tech companies and organizations better support and integrate veterans into their workforce? Does anyone have any advice on that?
Yeah, so I know one of the things that's pretty sweeping changes to companies is DEI efforts. I know some of the veteran stuff can potentially get rolled into there, along with minority like candidate placement type stuff. But you might not find a formal program at a place that you go. It's always something that you can ask, but what you'll find is there's veterans like everywhere. And so I know for example, for my company I work in now, like we know who each other are. We'll, send each other messages around Veterans Memorial and the other holidays. And you're going to have this wherever you go. It is, a fraternity where we all look out for each other, enjoy, commiserating about our days in service. And so you'll find that there, I'm pretty sure. But there's usually efforts. They might not be widely publicized, but everybody will say they like to hire veterans, definitely.
Absolutely. Anyone else have anything to add around maybe what organizations you've worked at or interviewed with, that they do?
Oh, well, just to Jeremy's point, they don't widely publicize it. Like my first job, I started working for WorldCom. Everyone that I worked with, nearly probably 90% of us that are on in the network operations floor, we're all veterans. All of us were. So I think they did that on purpose, just to be honest with you, because they knew we had the propensity to learn and we had attention to detail. We had a sense of urgency when things were broke. So I think that goes a long way. But um, you know, you might see them sometimes that on their website that they like veterans or they're veteran owned or something like that. That might be an indicator that they might cater to veterans.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think from my side, speaking to companies who maybe don't yet have that DE&I initiative, right? Or it's something that they're just now exploring and don't know where to go. Happy to have that conversation offline. I know a lot of more people are conscious, right? That veterans and ex-military are, within that group. And we want to ensure, equal employment across the board. So I'm happy to discuss. I think there's a lot of things. I know you guys mentioned having mentors, right? And other people in the organization. I always say that these sort of things don't happen overnight, right? You don't just have a group of veterans that walk into your door tomorrow and make up a team and all is dandy. It's kind of having conscious steps in place to ensure that once you are making that conscious effort and making those hires, they also are being, retained and feeling welcomed and heard and like a part of the team in any regard. So happy to discuss that with whomever after the call. Moving right along though, I'm conscious of time. We want to keep it rolling. So Keith, I'm going to pass it back to you. Setbacks are sadly inevitable, right? We see them all the time in the world of job searching. So what would be your best piece of advice for a candidate who's struggling to deal with rejections?
I think there's a few things, right? You can self-evaluate and kind of step back and look at your resume, go out and approach, others and look for any feedback or, constructive criticism around something that you may not be doing. And I think a couple things to be mindful of is it's a temporary setback. It's not a permanent failure. You can continue to apply and continue building your self skills and improvement, and then actually, you're able to action on those items and then go out and then just keep applying, keep a positive mindset, and focus on self-care, right? Finding a job is difficult. It's not an easy thing to do. And it takes patience sometimes. I really think, just continuing on with it, but it's not something you should be bashing yourself over the head on. Just staying with it and keeping that positive mindset really will set you apart as you continue your search.
Absolutely. I think especially when you're younger, right? Volume, volume, volume. I know when we first spoke, talked about just sending your resume anywhere you could, get your name out there, take any conversation you can, because you never know what that's going to turn into, right? Or what sort of opportunity that might lead to. So I couldn't agree more. I do know there was another question in the chat. I do, just before we answer it, the question was, what specific tech skills or certifications should I focus on acquiring to increase my competitiveness in the tech job market? Before we answer that, I think the answers will vary based on whoever asked that question, whatever industry or background you might be coming from, right? Whether that's systems and networking or you're going the software route. So I don't want us, to be listing them off if they're not super relevant. So if you could just write in the chat and specify what industry or specific, tech job you're looking to get, I think our panel might have a bit better of ease of being able to answer that. Another question that came from the group, and bear with me guys, I'm going on the fly, right? I know I said we'd do this at the end, but I want to make sure we get these all answered. So is it difficult to enter the cybersecurity market without experience? Even with courses, the market tends to want experienced professionals, and oftentimes my military experience does not count. Has anybody faced that, seen that? Any advice for, young cybersecurity professionals who are trying to land their first kind of full-time gig?
From the software side, there's a couple places, couple things you can do. There's some websites out there where you can freelance off of, right? And you basically just bid off a job description, and you put the number of hours that you think you can do it in, and how much you want to pay for it. So that's one way you can start getting experience. But again, that's extremely competitive because you're competing against the entire world on most of those websites. Some of the other ways you can get your experience. Wait, this is cybersecurity. Excuse me. Yeah, cybersecurity is a tough one though. You've got to. Your best bet is to go after the beginning search for those. Your A+ certification would be probably your first cert, and then followed by a Security Plus, and then they get deeper than Security Plus would be the first two I would recommend.
Yeah, I agree with the certifications. I think too, from a job perspective, I know, everyone kind of wants to be able to get that degree and go straight into a junior developer role. Do your research in your local area regarding internships, right? Even if it's just part-time, things like that. I think getting your foot in the door, especially companies that tend to be a little bit more larger and established, a lot of times they will have programs. I can always name drop a few to whomever asked that question, but I know certain ones have programs that will help you essentially go from student to intern to a full-time employee. And just looking up companies that have that. An internship might not be, the most glamorous immediate role you want to get out, right? It might not have the exact comp that you had in your mind, but what it does have is the opportunity for you then to get to where you want to go. And ultimately, I think when you're making that transition, that's what's most important, right? 2-3 years from now, is it going to take me to where and who I want to be? And I can also, after this, just as a note to the audience, I can do a bit of research and link some of these freelance websites that I know Zach mentioned. So that way, maybe we can ensure that you have access to those in case you aren't familiar with any of those. So I'll do a bit of research and post those on Ex-Military Careers. So make sure you follow. Moving right along, I believe I have another audience poll. I do. Okay, let's pop that bad boy on the screen, and we are going to pass this one to Zach. Why is it important to tailor make your resume to fit specific job applications? For example, I guess I should start by saying, having different resume templates and approaches for the public and private sectors.
That's a very good point. I know in the past when I've been looking for jobs, I actually tailor make my resume for each job I'm submitting for. And I know that seems like a lot of work, and it is, it really is. But you're trying to land a job here, so you want to increase your chances to land that job. So if you go look at those job postings and you go over for keywords, find out how many times certain words are mentioned in that job posting, and start highlighting those in your resume, but be honest and truthful about it as well. And highlighting that when a recruiter or an HR person starts looking at these resumes and they start filtering through them, they can see that you've mentioned those keywords in your resume already. And, usually those get sent to the hiring manager. So, like I said, it's a lot of work, but I think that's going to give you the best chance of success.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. And I think too, if there's something you're particularly strong in, right? Programming and Golang, don't list it just one time in your resume. Not as you mentioned, right, Zach, not everyone's highly technical. So if they see it just once, it's, oh, maybe they don't have that much experience. But if you're highlighting, specific projects you've programmed on in that language over and over, they're going to know that you have more skill in that area. I think another thing is ranking your skill set, right? If you do have exposure to 5-6 programming languages, I've seen people do that where they'll do, 9 out of 10, 6 out of 10, 3 out of 10. So, hey, I've had exposure to this, but here's where my bread and butter is. And I think those small customizations can go a long way as well. So I love that answer. Looks like, everyone mentioned, showcasing relevant skills and experience. Really as kind of the main reason for what to fit on a specific job application. Demonstrating attention to detail and effort is still huge. We all want to make sure, that there's no grammatical errors. I always recommend to my candidates, send it to me as a recruiter or to, your friends, family, somebody who's, very well written and articulate, and have them double check those details. And then also to increase chances of getting noticed by recruiters. Obviously, at the end of the day, right, we want hiring managers, recruiters, everyone to notice our resumes. So I think all equally as important in their own way. But moving right along, my next question is for Luke. So the world is evolving quickly, especially thanks to the advancements in modern technology. What can veterans do to ensure that they keep their skills relevant and up to date?
Yeah, I went to a talk and someone was talking about, and they were actually, it's funny because they weren't actually prior military or have anything to do with military, but they were talking about the subject, and they brought up OODA loop, which I thought was very appropriate. So it's observe, orient, decide, act. The world is changing very, very fast. And there's a lot of arguments about, is AI going to change software engineering? Who knows? Honestly, no one really knows at this point. People like strong opinions on either side are yet to be tested because we're watching it happen. So I think at the end of the day, what you can do is just take a look around, see what's changing, be involved in knowing what is changing and how it's changing. Stay curious. Still be interested in building things and progressing your knowledge, because that piece is always going to be important. There's going to always have to be people who understand how the technology works. And for those people, there will always be things to do. So don't get overwhelmed by AI taking jobs, all these other things. Just keep an eye on what's happening, stay educated, stay curious, and keep up to date, I think, is really the way to do it. And in the event that the world changes greatly, you'll see it coming, and you'll be able to position yourself into a spot where you can get a relevant job. But jobs aren't going to go away from AI or other things, and staying current on other technologies outside of AI is really just keeping an eye on what's happening. And I always, even my employees, I tell them to continue to interview and things like that, so they can see what other companies are doing. So keep your ear on the ground, pay attention, read tech blogs, read about what other people are doing, what technologies are coming up, they're popular, like Rust or some of these other growing languages. Is just really what you want to do, is just kind of stay involved in the community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I guess I'll flip this over to the group. I see a question here from the audience members, which is an interesting one, and definitely one we want to touch on. What advice would you all give to veterans who are considering a career change into the technology field, but may feel hesitant or uncertain about taking that sort of leap into a new position or market altogether?
I think some of the things that we discussed earlier, like the boot camps or some of those smaller Udemy classes, that gives you the idea, is this interesting to me? Is this something that I would be interested in making a career out of, right? Because I think they're asking for software engineering, right? Yeah, they are. So yeah, for sure, those smaller courses really kind of let you get your feet wet without really having to make that full commitment and finding out, is it something for you? And then, if it is something for you, there are tons of resources that you can then rely upon to start building those blocks into an actual career, whether that is, you standing up your own business, or you going to work for a technology company, or you going to work for a company that doesn't really work in technology, but they have their own technology within their company that they maintain. So possibilities are really endless in the software engineering realm. But yeah, I would think something like that would be really helpful to let you know if that's something that interests you or not.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think too, looking at, some of those freelance opportunities, if you've already taken that step, that I know Keith just mentioned, then, okay, maybe starting by doing part-time freelancing on the side. I see that a ton in candidate pools. I've had people transition their careers after 20 years, right? They've dabbled in software, they've dabbled in programming, they always had an interest, but maybe they, for whatever reason, took a path into finance, right? And then they kind of want to kickstart that. But from a financial perspective, right, they don't necessarily want to take this huge career step back. So how do I kind of meet myself somewhere in the middle? I've seen people do that for 4 or 5 years, or as you mentioned, right, maybe take a lower level position at a company to get into an internal company, but doing it part-time or on the side, and then eventually working your way into a full-time employee. I couldn't agree more. Anyone else have any other tidbits of advice before I move on to the next question? No. Okay, perfect. Okay. Keith and Jeremy, I'm going to direct this at both of you, so we get double-fold answer here. What do we mean when we talk about being authentic in the workplace or the recruitment process? And how can this improve your chances of landing a rewarding job? I have a quick statistic before you answer. According to EY, Gen Z values authenticity as its most important workplace trait.
Yeah, I think a couple of things that come to mind of being your authentic self is it allows you to build trust with your coworkers. You're not having to put on this fake corporate schmooze. You're actually just being your entertaining self, and it builds relationships within your teams. It improves performance. There's a bunch of after effects of just you being your authentic self that really make it just an easier environment overall.
Yeah, I think that's really well put. When you look at it, we spend a third of our adult life working, with others. So one, you got to understand that you've got to be authentic, because you will never be able to keep up a facade forever, nor should you ever want to keep up a facade. Um, if you're ever in a position, so this is where I would say that the tech industry, and really just life outside of the military, is more conducive to this than in the military. Whether you want to say blah or not, there's times you have to. Working outside is where you get to be your authentic, and can, hopefully professionally, talk to your boss and say, yeah, I don't know about that one, boss.
Right.
But yeah, you definitely want to be authentic. If you're not, you'll be found out quickly. And it kind of goes back to being honest, humble, especially in tech. Um, those are things that are completely important.
Absolutely. And I guess this question is almost is similar, right, in nature to the first, but I think it's relevant, especially for other hiring managers, HR managers who might be on the call and listening in. How or can you all or any of you provide insights into a company culture and how you would describe that company culture and its values of a tech organization that prioritizes hiring veterans? What would that kind of ideally look like, I suppose?
So, yeah, I think it depends on sector and what type of work you're doing. So my previous life, like mentioned, my first company out of the military was in the defense sector, which they're automatically, anytime you're talking, government contracts, specifically defense sector, and a lot of the government in general, there does seem to be a heavy influence from
Security clearances and
yeah,
such.
exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's obviously a lot of military in those type organizations. But that said, every company has their own values and culture. It's important to understand what those really are, not necessarily what they are on paper. To again kind of going back to the authentic point, and not slighting any company I work for and saying that, but no, I think yeah, it really is. You'll find it different, because it's there's not a one size fits all answer for this. Every organization differs.
Yeah.
And so it can be by sector, it can be by founders, by different leaders within the organization that's going to put different emphasis on the military, and hiring vets, and potentially even bringing in a veteran type culture. And so yeah, this is a really tough one.
I know. Well,
So
what I was
it's a
thinking
tough one.
too, that I think you alluded to, Jeremy, is that, your company culture and values should be your company culture and values, right? Like, no, not every, veteran thinks the same way, right? Acts the same way, will work the same in an environment. So I don't think those necessarily need to change to fit a demographic. It's being inclusive, right? And conscious of what those are, and how you represent yourself, and represent the community groups that you're trying to attract, and being open-minded in doing so, I think is beneficial as well. Conscious of time. So I want to ask one final question. I hope this doesn't shut down on me. I probably should have checked with Lucy before, before it ends. But the final question, which I think is really important, and I'm sure everyone wants to know, what is the best piece of advice you received when you were making a transition out of the military? So I'll start with you, Luke.
Yeah, I think so. I'm gonna go rogue and give the best piece of advice I got when I came into the military, and it was applicable on my way out as well. It was basically get in where you fit in, and the hardest part of getting into the military is feeling like you're the new person, and you find some friends, you hang out with those friends, you form a group, and that those are your people. Same thing on the way out. You know, you go to school or do what you're going to do, go to code boot camp. The hardest part is going to be landing that first job and getting that experience. Once you have that first job, that first experience, that's something you can take and you can use it to improve and get better jobs and everything else. So don't wait for everything to be perfect. Get in where you fit in and keep on moving.
Absolutely. Zach, I'll pass it over to you.
Sure. For me, it was networking. When I got out, a lot of the people I served with were getting out before me, and I stayed in contact with them. Even back then, it's so easy to stay in contact. At least, I had phone numbers and whatnot. But stay in contact with them, find out where they're at, and a lot of times you'll be able to get a good idea, at least based off of who you know, um, what's out there. And a lot of times, companies will hire in groups. So any of your friends that get out, they got hired, and maybe 2 or 3 months have passed, they might be hiring again. So just keep your ears out and keep in contact with your friends that have gotten out.
Absolutely. All right. And Jeremy, I'm passing the baton your way.
Yeah, so this is one might seem odd for a tech community transitioning. Is one that I wish somebody had told me. Is that being an adult is hard. So my experience was joined the Guard out of high school and then went active duty after college. But for the military, you're told where you're gonna live and what state. If you live on post, you've got your utilities and all that stuff provided, and taking care of housing upkeep. Just as Luke said, just getting the first job, like step into a career past the military is the hardest part. From there, it's going to become organic. It's just that shock to the system, but also just putting things in perspective, and knowing that you're probably going to succeed whether you realize it or not. But for me, I know the first time home ownership and all that good stuff that comes with it. I wish somebody had prepped me for, as well as other similar problems. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is just good life advice, right? Because that one resonates with me as well. Well, good. I appreciate that one, and I think that will resonate across the board. Keith, over to you. Bring us home.
I think a great piece of advice is, leverage your unique skills and experience, but be ready to adapt and learn. Of course, everyone has their own walks through life, and all of the skill that you've gained while you're in the military and your strengths, you want to be sure to highlight those. But in each new job or each new role that we take on, we'll face new challenges that we're really only going to be able to overcome if we apply that continuous learning mindset that we discussed a little bit ago.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all. That's it for me. We were able to, I think, answer all the questions. Bear with me. Let me see if there's anything else. I think we covered it all. So thank you for sharing your mornings, evenings, lunchtime, wherever you're based, with us. And thank you to our speakers for sharing your insights, and to our fabulous audience for participating. At the end here, we will offer a networking option. If you are interested in joining, I am conscious of time, but if anybody does want to pop on with our speakers for 5 minutes, please do write it in the chat, and we can create an opportunity for any of them to join and speak with you directly, or provide mentorship advice or anything that maybe you didn't feel like asking in the chat. So feel free to write that in the chat, and Lucy will let us know if we're going to do that networking here directly after this, and there would be a separate Zoom link sent to you directly if you are interested. We hope that you can join us for our next webinar. For those who wish to continue that discussion, again, just please drop it in the chat. And also please do follow our community on social media and reach out to me directly if you want to get involved with ex-military careers. All of our events are posted on that webpage. So if you follow it, you'll be in the know about any future panels. We do both local as well for on-site events, as well as these sort of remote virtual panels so that we can reach a broader audience. And to any hiring managers who, are thinking about hiring veterans, don't know where to begin, we're happy to facilitate introductions, conversation around that for our veteran community on our side. And lastly, with our in-person events, we also do look for companies to sponsor or partner with. We will promote your branding and whatnot. So if there's any interest in that, or you all have, some sort of mentorship community that you within the veteran community, we'd be happy to pair up. So please feel free to reach out. I'll have Lucy drop my email in the chat. But yeah, we're committed to the pursuit of ensuring diversity and inclusion, building a people-friendly planet, and really just closing that employment gap and promoting equality, especially for our veteran community, right? So to find out more, you can go to Ex-MilitaryCareers.com to continue the discussion. But for now, we'll see you all soon. Thank you guys so much, panelists, Jeremy, Luke, Keith, Zach. Yeah, it was wonderful to have you. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Have a good one.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.